Arrest her immediately. Your wife's violated community ordinances, and I demand federal prosecution. Karen's voice cut through the early morning like a rusty chainsaw standing there, all puffed up in front of two sheriff's deputies she'd just summoned out to our ranch. All this chaos, believe it or not, started because my wife Sarah ignored a $100 fine over a wooden chair I'd set next to our chicken coop. There was Karen phone out recording everything like she was exposing some criminal empire, when really all she was doing was putting on a show for herself and the two deputies, who looked like they'd rather be anywhere else. But let me tell you, when Sarah calmly pulled her wallet out and handed her ID to those officers, the air around us just froze. Both cops, these folks who'd walked up thinking they'd be dealing with some rural ruckus, they went dead quiet, turned toward her, and I kid you not, gave a little bow, muttering, "Sorry for the trouble." Your Honor, you should have seen Karen's face. Her whole sense of power just collapsed in 3 seconds flat. What happened after that? Well, that's when Karen realized she'd picked the wrong battle. Because see, my wife, the quiet flannel-shirted farm girl, had a secret that wasn't exactly small potatoes. But maybe I'm getting ahead of myself. That morning started off just like any other our little patch of Cherokee County, sunlit and peaceful. I was out feeding the hens, watching them scratch around and make those happy little sounds that meant all was well in their world. That infamous wooden chair was just sitting there by the coop, right where I'd put it when we first moved in, a simple bench I built out of old barnwood for Sarah to sit and watch the sunrise, coffee in hand. It was a symbol, you know, of the peace we'd come here chasing after years of city life and long nights sitting up with my mom through her cancer treatments. Moving out here was supposed to be a fresh start for both of us, especially for Sarah, who'd always seemed happiest when nobody expected anything from her except being my wife, not the high-powered professional she used to be back in Atlanta. Sarah walked out, 2 mugs in hand, auburn hair catching the sunlight, wearing those faded jeans and my old flannel. She looked at home like she belonged to this land. "Morning, handsome," she said, settling down on that illegal chair with a sigh that sounded like contentment itself. All was well until the crunch of gravel and the sight of Karen Vanderbilt's white Lexus breaking the calm at exactly 8:17. "I know because I checked my watch. Farmer's always checking the time." Karen got out, looking like she was about to inspect the troop's clipboard suit and a kind of new money attitude that's always a little desperate to be old money. Folks like her come out to rural Georgia thinking they want peace and quiet, but end up trying to remake the place in the image of some gated subdivision. She marched right up to Sarah, her voice dripping with that artificial sweetness that barely hid the steel underneath. "Mrs. Blackwood, I've brought you a formal notification of community standards violation, specifically Section 12.3.7, unauthorized outdoor furniture in an agricultural zone." She handed Sarah a piece of paper like it was a court summons. Sarah took it, barely glancing at it, before tearing it into perfect little strips and dropping it in the trash. Karen's face cycled through about 5 shades of red, settling on a color that really didn't go with her highlights. Sarah just took a slow sip of coffee, never breaking eye contact, while Karen ranted about rules and fines and her legal authority. I stood there, leaning on the fence post, watching Sarah's patience, the kind you only get by dealing with impossible people for years. She never got rattled, never bit the bait, just waited for Karen to run out of steam. But Karen, she doubled down. Out came the phone. "I'm recording this for official HOA record," she announced like she was on Law and Order or something. All because my wife wouldn't move a chair. See, what Karen didn't know, and what no one in this neighborhood knew, was that Sarah had handled way tougher than HOA presidents before. There was a reason she could stay so cool under pressure, but I'll get to that. 2 days later, Karen made good on her threat. She came back, this time with deputies in tow, looking like she'd won a major victory. She jumped out of her car, clipboard waving, and started reciting her case. Multiple violations, destroyed documents, a pattern of lawlessness threatening the very fabric of Sundown Valley. You'd think she was describing a mafia operation, not a couple of tired city folk and a few chickens. The younger Deputy Morrison looked like he was praying for an asteroid strike, while his partner, Deputy Chief Rodriguez, listened with the patience of someone who's seen it all. Sarah came out to greet them, wiping her hands on a dish towel, that calm drawl she'd picked up since we moved south, offering sweet tea to everyone like this was just a normal Tuesday. Rodriguez explained, nice and professional, that they just needed to sort out the facts. Sarah handed her ID over, and that's when everything changed. Rodriguez straightened up, eyes wide. Morrison nearly lost his composure. Your Honor? Rodriguez stammered, her whole attitude shifting to respectful, we apologize for the intrusion. Karen's jaw hit the gravel. Regardless of what identification she's shown you, Karen tried the law should apply equally to everyone. But Rodriguez, keeping it diplomatic, explained, this is a civil matter. You'll want to pursue it through the HOA, not the sheriff's department. Karen was left standing there powerless, realizing too late that she'd just tried to put a judge in handcuffs over a $100 chair fine. But Karen, she wasn't the type to back down. She jumped right onto Facebook, uploading a video titled Corrupt Judge Protects Lawbreaking Husband, showing Sarah calmly ignoring her citations, but conveniently cutting out the part where the officers bowed and apologized. The video went viral by small-town standards, dozens of shares, hundreds of comments, neighbors picking sides. Some calling Sarah corrupt, others calling Karen a busybody. Old Mrs. Henderson started airing suspicions about those Blackwoods, while Bob Martinez at the feed store defended us, saying anyone who raises chickens that healthy can't be all bad. You know what I mean. Sarah didn't bite. Instead of fighting back online, she quietly got on the phone talking to lawyers and old friends I'd never heard her mention, calmly collecting her own evidence. Trust me, honey, she said. Karen just made a very expensive mistake. That night, a new character entered the story, Councilman Harold Winchester, rolling up to Karen's house in his oversized pickup, the kind that's more about image than function. I watched from the mailbox as he and Karen plotted on her porch, their body language saying everything. This wasn't just about a chair anymore. Sure enough, the next day, Karen's campaign kicked into overdrive. She was pushing hashtags, calling for judicial accountability, weaponizing community standards, even as she'd spent months using those same rules to target anyone who didn't fit her mold garden gnomes, basketball hoops, you name it. And now with Winchester in her corner, it became clear this wasn't just a crusade. It was a land grab. Late one evening, curious and unable to sleep, I walked past her house and overheard enough to know their plan was to force out at least a dozen families, picking us off one by one with fines, code enforcement, and legal harassment so they could buy up land cheap for a resort development. Our fight, it turned out, was about way more than a chair. When Karen's hired private investigator showed up at my door, waving around the ghost of my past, a lawsuit from years ago in Atlanta dredged up and twisted into a threat. I'll admit I hit my breaking point. Maybe we should just move the chair, I told Sarah, voice shaking, and pay the fine. Maybe it's not worth the fight. She took my hand, looked me right in the eye, and said, you fought before Marcus when you had to, and you were right. We can't back down now, not when other families are being bullied out of their homes. That was the turning point for me. Sarah got to work, and so did I. She brought in the law, pulling together evidence of Karen's embezzlement, tens of thousands stolen from the HOA budget to pay off personal debts funneled through Winchester's company. The deputies, it turned out, had been quietly building a case too, but needed someone with legal authority to tie it all together. The plan was set: 7 families who'd been harassed, 2 deputies, and even a federal investigator tracking the money trail. Karen, completely oblivious, called a big emergency HOA meeting, rented the community center, even invited the local news thinking she'd get to expose Sarah on live TV. The place was packed, neighbors, media supporters, even her haters. Karen's presentation was all drama photos, timelines, social media posts trying to paint us as criminals. But when Sarah stood up, the whole room shifted. Calm, no drama. She rolled out bank records, signed affidavit statements from 23 families about systematic harassment, then dropped the bombshell the FBI had been investigating for months. Right on cue, 2 agents walked in and arrested Winchester for fraud and racketeering live on Channel 7. Karen tried to shout it down. This is all lies. I was protecting the community, but nobody believed her anymore. Her world unraveled fast. The same HOA rules she'd used to hurt people were now turned on her 7 lawsuits, formal complaints, and a mountain of evidence of her own violations. The feed store, the garden, the workshop families Karen had targeted now took her to court, armed with real lawyers and a community united against her. Winchester's arrest set off a domino effect, uncovering a whole network of fraud and shell companies. And then at her lowest, Karen called a press conference babbling about conspiracies, deep state agents, blaming everyone but herself. But in the middle of her rant, she just broke down crying raw, admitting that after losing her son in an accident, she'd tried to control everything, thinking rules would keep anyone else from getting hurt. For the first time, she seemed human, lost, grieving more to be pitied than hated. Sarah, in her way, saw that too. Instead of demanding punishment, she offered Karen a deal, counseling and community service in place of prosecution if she'd truly try to make amends. Karen took it, and over the next 6 months, she changed, helping other grieving parents, selling her house to pay back what she'd stolen, starting to heal for real. That old wooden chair is still by the chicken coop, now surrounded by benches neighbors brought over. Folks call it the Peace Garden, a spot to remember that sometimes you've got to stand up and fight, but you can also choose to forgive. The smallest things, like a wooden chair, can change everything if you let them. Now I'll leave you with this. Where do you draw the line between justice and mercy? Is there someone in your life who needs a second chance? Share your thoughts down below. Sometimes your story is the light someone else needs. If this tale hit home, pass it on, because you know the world could use more stories where compassion wins.